Well, good evening. It's really great to be with you, at least virtually, out at JPC this evening. If it hadn't been for coronavirus, I'd have been there in person, but we are where we are, so at least we can do this over video like this. Well, I'm recording this video for you today in Dundee, up in Scotland. That's been home for my family and I for the past 4 years or so, and I work here heading up an organisation called the Solas Centre for Public Christianity. But before I moved to Scotland in 2016, my family and I, we lived in Toronto in Canada for 6 years and had a fantastic time there, travelled a lot across the country, speaking and so forth. And on one occasion, I was on a flight from Toronto to Vancouver, going across Canada, when I struck up a conversation with the man in the seat next to me. And after I'd found out all about his work and his family, he finally asked me, so what do you do for a living? I replied that I worked for a Christian organisation that helps people think about the big questions of life. And when he heard that, his entire demeanour changed. He looked at me and he snapped back these words. He said, "I hate religious people." Well, I thought to myself, this is going to be a long flight. It's 4 hours from Toronto to Vancouver. But I felt I had to say something. So I looked at him and I said, just out of interest, why is it that you hate religious people? And he replied, well, religious people are intolerant. You're always telling people what to believe. Why can't I believe anything, whatever I want? How dare anybody tell me what to believe? Religion is intolerant, it's narrow-minded, and it's divisive. Religion poisons everything. Well, his closing words there, religion poisons everything, those weren't original to him. That's actually a quote from the late Christopher Hitchens, who until his untimely death a few years ago was one of the most influential atheists in the world. His book sold millions of copies. And his book, God Is Not Great, from where that quote, religion poisons everything, comes, opens with a great long list of all the problems in the world that Hitchens thinks religion has caused, all the wars and violence and persecutions and so forth. And Hitchens thinks it all goes back largely to religion's tendency to be intolerant and oppressive of those who disagree with it. Now, Hitchens is not wrong in that assumption, that belief. Think of that famous song by John Lennon, Imagine, a song that's almost become a secular anthem. And in that song, Lennon pens those words about imagining a world without religion. A world without people stridently believing things, a world without people trying to convert others and insist they believe the same as them. It would be, Lennon sings, a world where people could live in peace and harmony and so on. Well, were Lennon correct? Can religion breed intolerance? Can it poison things? Well, I think only the very, very foolish or the very, very naive would answer no to that question. Examples are everywhere. Just turn on the news to see near daily examples of people killing one another or murdering one another in the name of religion or of belief. But here's the thing. For all of its power, there is still something of a problem with this critique of belief. Well, two problems, actually. The first is that some things are worth believing very stridently because they're true. Now, if you went to see your GP, you went to see your family doctor, complaining of terrible stomach pains, and your GP replied, I wouldn't dream of telling you what's wrong with you. That would be oppressive. I have my beliefs about medicine. You have your own beliefs, and I wouldn't dream of telling you that my belief is right and your belief is wrong. Hey, after all, you're the patient. What do you think's wrong with you? I suspect your reaction wouldn't be, what an incredibly progressive doctor. You'd rather be thinking, this is a raving lunatic. I need a new doctor, and fast. You see, when it comes to things that really, really matter, we know that it's important to get our beliefs right. And we don't mind people telling us even insistently, quite firmly, what they believe the truth is. I mean, for sure, I don't want my doctor actually doing violence to me and whacking me over the head with a baseball bat. But I do want my doctor to tell me what she actually believes is wrong with me. And if I have got it into my head that my stomach pains are caused by 5G cell towers, she's completely right to try to talk me out of my bizarre conspiracy theory. Some beliefs really matter because they're true and they really make a difference. But the second problem with the critique that Hitchens and Lennon make of religion is that I think our problems are much deeper than religion. For sure, Hitchens and Lennon and many others have made some pretty good points about religion and the way that beliefs can cause terrible damage, and that's not that hard to do. Frankly, it's a bit like shooting fish in a barrel. But if religion can cause problems, what's the answer? Is the answer to believe nothing? Would an atheistic, purely secular society solve all of our problems? Well, no, because if you look back through history, you see a pattern from the French Revolution to Stalin's Russia, from Mao's communist China to Pol Pot's Cambodia. The list goes on. And we see time and time again that atheism plus political power has led to the death of millions. So what's going on here? What is it about belief, be it religious belief or secular belief, that can cause such problems? Or maybe it's because many beliefs enable us all too easily to divide the world into two. We can divide the world into them and us, and the moment you do that, you can end up discriminating against, if you're not careful, discriminating against those who are different to you, who are not part of your group. And we have this tendency as human beings to do this. In fact, it's an increasing problem of late because social media has made this problem much, much worse. In his book, 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now, Jaron Lanier, one of the most famous computer scientists in the world, one of the people who actually invented virtual reality. In that book, 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now, Jaron launches this stinging critique on social media. And one of his chief arguments against social media is the tribalism it causes. People flock together in tribes with shared political or other beliefs, and they gang up, insult, or troll those who think differently. And technology has simply exacerbated this human tendency to exclude others. And it does seem to be a pretty deeply wired human tendency. We can use belief, political belief, religious belief, to divide the world into them and us, into good people and bad people, the right people and the wrong people. And of course, we always put ourselves in the okay, the right, the correct box. We are all of us, if we are honest, desperately tempted at times to be intolerant to those who are different from us. And so my biggest problem with the slogan, religion poisons everything, is that it doesn't really go far enough. Let me illustrate this one other way by taking Christopher Hitchens' famous little soundbite, religion poisons everything, and let's just swap the word religion out for a different word. What about the word money? Money poisons everything. I mean, doesn't money cause greed, jealousy, crime, and violence? I think we could make a case that money poisons everything. Or what about politics? Politics causes division, hatred, enmity, and intolerance. Surely we could make a case that politics poisons everything. What about science? Well, science causes environmental damage. It's led to the death of millions. It's given us napalm. It's given us the atom bomb. It's given us global warming. Science poisons everything. I think I could make that case. And the more you do this little exercise, the more you realize something. The more you realize that the problem is not science or money or politics or even religion. They're just symptoms. The problem is something much deeper. The problem isn't out there somewhere. The problem seems to be in here somewhere. The problem is us, human beings. Each one of us, me and you and all of us, have this ability to pick up things like religion or politics or money or science, and we can use them for great good. We can also use them for great evil. We can be both angelic and we can be monstrous. So if humanity is the problem, how do we solve a problem like humanity? How do we overcome our tendency to divide people into groups, to play in-group, out-groups, politics, to feel superior, to be intolerant? How do we solve that problem? And what might Christianity have to say about this question? Well, I think the first thing we need to solve this tendency we have to be divisive and to use our beliefs this way is we need a real concrete basis for human dignity. If we're going to treat one another with respect and with care, to listen to those we disagree with and to treat them as fellow human beings, not as people to be destroyed, we need a basis for that. What basis do we have for treating all human beings as our equals, whether or not their views align with ours? Well, for the last 70 years or so, there's been a concerted effort by politicians and lawyers and activists to develop human rights theory, an idea that I imagine most of you watching this would be committed to, even passionate about them, because human rights underpin so many other things, social justice and so much more. In fact, listen to these famous, powerful words from the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It reads like this. It says, recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom and justice and peace in the world. All human beings are born free, excuse me, and equal in dignity and rights. Those words sound noble, they sound beautiful, they're amazing words. And they do give us a wonderful basis for standing against discrimination and intolerance and hatred. But there's a big question, isn't there, about that statement I've just read to you. Those words I've just read, are they true? You see, the problem is this: if there is no God, if we live in a world where matter is the ultimate reality, then human rights is just a fiction. A beautiful fiction, but just a myth nonetheless. Ultimately, each one of you listening to this is just a random collocation of atoms. And you have no more significance, no more dignity, no more rights than any other collection of atoms. A dog, a table, a rubber chicken, a pile of elephant poo, you name it. And saying that one set of atoms, a human being, has a special set of rights or dignity that another set of atoms doesn't, is, if atheism is true, laughable. There's only one belief I know that can support modern human rights theory: the idea that human beings are precious, they have dignity and should not be discriminated against, and that's Christianity. See, in the very first page of the Bible, we read these words. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So the Bible is very clear. You are not mere atoms and particles. You are not a mere accident of biology. No, rather you are made in the image of God. And that means you and every other human being has inherent value, infinite value, value so great that God would consider paying an infinite price to forgive, restore, and rescue you. More on that later. We're asking this evening, does it matter what you believe? And I believe it really does matter, because only certain beliefs can actually give us a foundation, a basis for things like human rights and dignity and justice. You know, there is nothing wrong with believing something passionately. Nothing wrong with being passionate about your beliefs. What matters is whether that belief leads you to exclude others or whether it leads you to treat others with dignity and respect. But one other thought. In order to deal with the human tendency to exclude, to weaponize our beliefs, you know, we need to find a basis for human dignity, and we've just talked about that. But we need a basis for one other thing. We need a basis for humility, something that undercuts our ability to think too well of ourselves and look down on others. And we all do this, don't we? It's incredibly easy to look down on others. You know, it's sobering to ask yourself, mentally, to ask yourself the question, how quickly you can complete the sentence, I am a better person than. I bet many of us here can do it instinctively without thinking too hard. And this, of course, is one of the problems when it comes to religion. Many people think that religion is all about being good and moral and upright and spiritual and so forth. But the problem is that quickly leads to a sense of superiority. If you are a Buddhist, you can look down on those who are not as enlightened as you, whose Buddha consciousness is less developed. If you're a Hindu, you can very easily start looking down on those whose karma is less than yours. If you're an atheist, you can look down on those who aren't as smart as you, especially those religious nitwits, right? And if you're a Muslim, you can feel superior, that your good deeds outweigh those of other people and you're far more likely to go to heaven than they are. A sense of superiority is a big problem, especially if you're religious, and atheism functions for many people like a religion. There's only one exception to this pattern that I know of, and that's Christianity. Or at least Christianity as Jesus preached it. See, Jesus was probably the most anti-religious founder of any religious founder in history. You know, look at the story we just read a wee while ago from Luke's Gospel. That story Jesus told about the tax collector and the Pharisee. You know, in the 21st century, we can miss how shocking that story was when Jesus first told it in the first century. You see, people in Jesus' day, they would have assumed that the Pharisee, that utterly religious, moral Jewish leader, they'd have assumed the Pharisee was the hero of the story. Pharisees were believed to be moral and upright and religious, concerned to do the right thing and for people to know they were doing the right thing. By contrast, everyone hated tax collectors. Nothing changes, right? They were considered by the first century Jewish people to be the scum of the earth. They collaborated with the hated Romans. They ripped people off. They were totally corrupt. Yet Jesus reverses the script, turns it on its head, making the point it was precisely because the Pharisee thought so much of himself that was the problem. By contrast, the tax collector knew that he was a total mess, knew that he needed God and God's help. And as Jesus said, all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. You see, most people I meet seem to think there are two ways to live. It's a very common myth that there are two ways to live. Many people think, well, you could choose to be irreligious, you could choose to be an atheist. But of course, the problem is that actually leads to being self-centered, because if you're an atheist, if you're not careful, all your life ends up revolving around you and your beliefs and your opinions. In fact, it's sobering that if you try and remove God, you often end up making yourself God in his place. So many people think you can choose irreligion, or you can choose to be religious. But of course that leads to arrogance as well, because you then end up thinking I'm nicer, better, holier than other people. Most people think there are two ways to live, irreligion or religion. But both lead to excluding people and to intolerance. But what if there aren't two ways to live? What if there are three ways to live? What if you could choose religion or irreligion? Or what if you rejected both and chose the third way, the Jesus way? See, the message of Jesus is not be a good person and God will like you. The message of Jesus is you don't have the power to be a good person, quite frankly, so don't you dare start thinking about looking down on others. The message of Jesus is that actually your life is so broken and you are so far from God and you so don't have the ability to change that on your own without radical inner transformation. And the only way to get that radical inner transformation and healing and forgiveness is to accept what Jesus did for us when he paid for our brokenness on the cross, when he took the punishment that we deserved for our self-centeredness, our arrogance and our pride. That middle way, that Jesus way, says we can do nothing to put our lives right without first powerfully encountering Jesus and discovering forgiveness and new life in him. We exclude others and we discriminate, all of us, because our brokenness has first excluded us from God. In Jesus, we have the offer of putting that relationship back together again. See, in conclusion, what you believe, especially about life's deepest questions, really matters. Belief really matters because your beliefs affect so much else. If you believe that human beings are just atoms and particles, if you believe your life is yours to do as you wish and everybody else can go jump, if you believe that you are superior, better, cleverer, or holier than others, all of those beliefs will have some pretty dreadful consequences. If, on the other hand, you believe that you're created by a God who loved you so much that he sent his son to give his life for you so that you might have that chance of forgiveness and a relationship with him, then if you take that seriously, it will affect how you live and how you treat others. So yes, belief matters. But one very final thought in conclusion. Belief will only get you so far. Belief will only get you so far. See, if I believe that my doctor is right when she says I need this treatment, but in particular I need this particular medical treatment because of my cancer diagnosis, then if I don't act on that belief, I'm in trouble. If I leap out of an aeroplane and I believe everything the skydiving instructor told me about the efficacy of parachutes, but I don't act on that belief and pull the ripcord, I'm going to demonstrate precisely why they call it terminal velocity when I hit the ground. And likewise, if I just believe the claims that Jesus made, especially his diagnosis that my very nature is corrupt, which is why I, like you and everybody else, am guilty as everybody else with a tendency to look down on others. If I simply believe his diagnosis, believe what he said, but do nothing, just keep it a kind of mental belief, then nothing changes. I need to actually act on it. See, Jesus told one other story. He told many stories actually, but one other story he told that I want to leave you with that is pertinent to all of this. Jesus told a story saying that a person who hears about him and even believes, but doesn't do anything with that belief, is rather like a person who builds a house with no foundations. A person builds a house with no foundations and suddenly along comes a storm and the whole house collapses. But, said Jesus, the person who hears and believes and acts, they're like the person who builds a house with deep foundations, one that can withstand any storm. Belief really matters, but so does action. And the question I want to leave you with is, where do you stand with Jesus today? Maybe as you watch this and listen to this, you've been thinking about the Christian faith, exploring some of these things. Well, what are the next steps for you? How do you take that further? Maybe you've got a question or objection. Maybe a friend invited you along to watch this service, and you're sitting there thinking, yes, this is all very well, but, okay, what are you doing about that objection? Are you trying to get the answer to your question? Don't hide behind questions and use them to keep Jesus at a distance. Or are you sitting on the fence? You've been checking out this the message of Christianity. You've read and studied quite a lot about Jesus. You know a lot of this stuff, but you haven't yet acted on it. And maybe you know right now, deep within you, that tonight is the night, today is the day, that you actually need to do something about what Jesus said. Not just keep it as a belief, but move it from head to heart as well. Let me pray for you, and then we'll wrap this up. Father God, I want to thank you that you didn't just give us a set of ideas to believe, but that in the person of Jesus, you stepped into space and time and history. You didn't just tell us what was true, but you showed us what was true in the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. Father God, for folks who are watching this, who are wrestling with questions or doubts or things they need to think through, would you help them have the courage to pursue the answers? And for those who are watching this evening, who feel that real draw of your spirit within them, that today is the day they need to actually act on this and to begin that relationship with you that's possible through Jesus, would you prompt them to take that step even as they watch this video? Thank you that belief matters, but far more than that, trust matters, and that in Jesus you have given us not just some great ideas, but a life and a witness and a death and a resurrection we can truly trust as the foundation of all that matters. And in his name we pray. Amen.